Back in the day, people were a lot more self-reliant. They knew how to take care of themselves and their loved ones, just like my grandfather did. Many from their generation would probably scoff at how modern people immediately run to the doctor for every small cut and bruise which can easily be fixed at home, or how much we pay for health care we don't really need. Today, I want to show you some common sense ways to manage most health conditions from the comfort of your own home. I'm talking about simple things like relieving pain, stopping a wound from bleeding, applying a stitch, managing blood pressure and blood sugar, calming down a racing heart, keeping your memory in great shape, and clearing an infection, boosting your immunity, controlling stress levels, and many, many more. When I was a boy, my mother wouldn't take me to see a doctor for every small scratch I got playing in the park. If I fell and hurt my knees, she wouldn't sue the park like some modern folks do. People back in the day were a lot more responsible. They lived in the real world. Today, we've become increasingly disconnected from it, and we stand to pay the ultimate price for this folly when the system fails. But this forgotten wisdom is not only reserved for dark times. These methods are nothing fancy, but they will probably save you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on unnecessary doctor's appointments over the next few years. It will also make you less dependent on a vulnerable medical system. We never know what the future holds, and what we find normal today, like going to the pharmacy or hospital, might be gone tomorrow. Please listen carefully to this free advice, as one day it may help you or someone you love. I've recently got in touch with a frontline doctor working in a country that's been dealing with hardship and shortages for years and has yet to recover. The truth is, if you want to see what happens during hard times, all you have to do is look at Venezuela. No electricity, no running water, no law, no antibiotics, no painkillers, no anesthetics, no insulin, no nothing. But if you want to find out how you can still manage in a desperate situation like this, you must also look to Venezuela and learn from the handful of people who cope despite widespread medical shortages of every kind. Dr. Maybell is one of them. She's a general surgeon at Caracas University Hospital. People over there had to discover new ways to take care of their own health care once pharmacies ran dry and hospitals overflowed with patients. In this short presentation, I'll show you 3 things I've learned from her that will help you take care of yourself and your family during dark times and may help you slash some medical costs starting today. Each one is important, but the third one is absolutely astonishing. I would have never thought about it and guessed how effective it is. Hi, my name is Claude Davis. I'm an old-fashioned guy who some people like to call a prepper, but I'm not one of those folks you see on TV preparing for a zombie apocalypse. I do prepare for an uncertain future, but I like to do it as our grandparents did, when nearly every household canned food for winter, saved rainwater in wooden barrels, and grew natural remedies in their own backyard. The first of the 3 things I want to share with you is probably hard to believe, that when everything is still okay in our country, but the simple truth is that once society starts to break down, going to a hospital can be a very bad idea. In the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, a lot of people were left without a home, food, electricity, or running water. But some still had all these things because they had prepared for such an event. My friend Tom was one of them. He had at least 3 months' worth of food and water and a brand new generator that could power his entire home. Because Tom thought he had everything he needed at home, and because his house was on high ground, he decided to stay and weather out the storm. During the hurricane, a small wooden splinter flew inside through a broken window and pierced his hand. It was just a tiny wound. It wasn't really deep, and he thought he could manage it at home. He bandaged the wound with what he still had in his first aid kit and went to sleep that night. A few days later, he woke up in a cold sweat. His finger was pulsating, and he could tell an infection was taking hold. What you want to do in this kind of situation, other than disinfecting the wound, is to immediately take some antibiotics. Unfortunately, Tom didn't have any stockpiled because, as you know, they require a prescription. In a minute, I'll show you a way around that, but which people in Venezuela discovered after they ran out of antibiotics. Over the next couple of days, Tom's situation went from bad to worse. He began to run a constant high fever, and he barely had the energy to crawl out of bed. Every time he called 911 to ask for an ambulance, he always got a busy tone probably because the hospitals in the area had lost power and were already overcrowded with hundreds of sick and injured people. The roads were also not accessible yet by car. By the time my friend reached a hospital, his hand had swollen to the size of a football, and he was in great pain. As he desperately tried to get to the front of the line, he almost fainted a few times and had to be propped up by others. Tom told me he was one of the lucky ones who managed to see a doctor before it was too late. The doctor examined his hand and prescribed some antibiotics. Things were on the mend, but then an unforeseen problem came up. Overcrowded hospitals with lackluster sanitation and hygiene are the perfect breeding environments for germs. Tom's already weakened body picked up another, more aggressive bacteria that didn't respond to the usual treatment. I know firsthand that in the U.S., hospital administrators are pulling their hair out, wondering how to reduce hospital-acquired infections. The rate can be alarmingly high. In a crisis, you might have a much better chance of picking up an infection in a hospital than if the doctor performed the procedure in your own bedroom. At least at home, you have germs that you've developed an immunity against, and they're usually not resistant to every antibiotic known to man. After lying in a hospital bed for weeks on end, pumped full of intravenous antibiotics, Tom finally began to recover. The doctors were able to save his life. Others were not so fortunate, and despite what the media and government would have you believe, the greatest number of casualties after Katrina were not caused by the flooding itself, but by the infections in the medical crisis that followed. That's why every person should have some antibiotics stockpiled at home. In a crisis, it may be too late to find out what you really need, or doing so may put you in harm's way. If Tom would have had just a few antibiotics at home, he would have never had to leave his house. How do you stockpile enough life-saving antibiotics without a prescription? When there were no more antibiotics in hospitals and pharmacies across Venezuela, doctors there discovered fish and bird antibiotics could be used to treat their patients. Believe it or not, they have the same active substances found in human antibiotics. Every capsule of fish mox, for example, contains nothing but 250 milligrams of amoxicillin, the same substance found in amoxicillin capsules for humans. A substance is a substance after all. Most importantly, they don't require a prescription. You can order a month's supply for just $10 online or from a pet store almost anywhere in America. Plus, you can stockpile as many of them as you please because they keep good for years. If one day your life or the life of someone you love were to depend on it, how would you feel knowing you could still have this ace in the hole? Of course, you should always take human antibiotics if they're still available, and only after consulting a doctor. I also don't advise taking antibiotics for every minor problem. I probably only used them 4 or 5 times in my life. Now, I suspect that you, like many other people, have a small medicine cabinet at home. Maybe it's not fully stocked, but at least you have some painkillers, an anti-inflammatory, or some other medication you need in there. Just imagine that's all gone tomorrow and you can't buy any more. What will you do? My guess is that sooner or later, you'll do what they did in Venezuela. You will turn to the medicinal plants growing in your backyard or in a nearby forest or park. They have so much more to offer than you might think, but it isn't until people run almost out of medicine completely that they realize that. If you don't know this already, many of the medicines on the market today are still derived from substances found in common plants.
Aspirin is made from the bark of the willow tree, and with the right knowledge, you can extract it yourself to lower a fever or fight pain and inflammation. The flu medicine known as Tamiflu is derived from a plant called the star anise. About 90% of the world's star anise crop is used to make Tamiflu. An alkaloid from this tree was discovered to be effective against malaria and leg cramps. Today we call the drug quinine. You can find it at the retail price of $218 at Walgreens. And this fungus contains a powerful immunosuppressive substance that can ameliorate symptoms of multiple sclerosis and other autoimmune conditions. The derived drug today is called Gilenya, and 30 capsules will set you back around $9,000. And the list goes on, and that's why even today, one of the most expensive things that you can buy on the black market in Venezuela is not food or guns, but medicinal plants. In America, these wild plants are still widely available, so my advice is to forage or buy the ones that you need and won't be able to find at the pharmacy anymore. Still, the greatest problem that you'll face in a crisis will be the absence of doctors and other medical experts. So chances are, during dark times, you'll probably need to take your health into your own hands. As the economic collapse worsened in Venezuela, so did the medical situation. Many were left waiting in line for hours on end to see an overworked doctor who had almost nothing left to treat them with. Similar things happened after Katrina ravaged New Orleans, and people died needlessly in hospital hallways, waiting for someone to give them the time of day. What people really need, and what could save families like yours and mine in the next crisis, are a few inexpensive but carefully selected medical supplies and the right knowledge to use them. The truth is, you don't need to see a doctor or be a doctor yourself to take care of most common health problems. I'm talking about the simple ones, not performing brain surgery. So wouldn't you want an expert to guide you on the right path, to tell you exactly what to keep in your medicine cabinet, and to teach you a few simple do-it-yourself methods to take care of your own health at home? I hope the answer is yes, because that's what I can do for you today. I've come to believe that in dark times, most people will not have access to a hospital while infection rates soar. You won't be able to buy medicines at the pharmacy, and they won't be able to consult a doctor when they need to. With Dr. Maybell's invaluable help, I was able to determine exactly what medicines and medical supplies a person has to keep at home to help themselves and their loved ones in times of need, and the minor but life-saving procedures that can be performed safely without ever having to set foot outside your front door. I asked Maybell to write everything down in a guide so that anyone can take advantage of these bits of knowledge when they're needed the most. It's called The Home Doctor, Practical Medicine for Every Household. You can use it whenever hospitals become overwhelmed and dangerous, or to help yourself or a loved one while awaiting an ambulance to arrive. Inside, you'll also discover the medicinal plants that you can use, as well as the medical supplies, Western medicines, and do-it-yourself procedures that you need to keep by your side. So I hope that you'll be wise enough to take advantage of everything we've painstakingly saved for you, from the practical, day-to-day medical experience of a frontline doctor working in a collapsed medical system and country. Let me show you just some of the things you'll find inside the Home Doctor. One of the first things you'll discover is which 10 medical supplies you need to stock up on before it's too late. These are not expensive and should still be available, but they tend to run out fast. In case you haven't realized it yet, most of the medical supplies and pills we take for granted come from China and India. When things go bad, that supply chain will stop working, and you'll be left with only what you have on hand after the pharmacies run dry. One of the 10 vital supplies you need in your house is a painkiller called naproxen, which is over-the-counter and a lot more powerful than ibuprofen, for example. In Venezuela, electricity has turned into a rare and unpredictable commodity. They don't have it all the time, and blackouts have become a normal part of daily life. If you're preparing for the worst-case scenario, then you must expect frequent blackouts. Inside the Home Doctor, you'll also learn about the biggest medical mistakes that you can make in a blackout, and what to do with important medications that require refrigeration, like insulin or Humira.